We're talking today with my friend Kelly Saylor, who is a licensed counselor and marriage and family therapist. And we met online. Actually, Kelly, you found me. Can you refresh my
Did.
memory on how that happened?
Yes. And to be honest, I started following you years ago. I don't even know how many years it has been at this point. But I've always loved your writings, your blogs, your books, and courses because I've always felt that what you've actually have said has been so respectful to both men and women. And also what you write, it actually does work in actually helping couples. And so I've been a big fan for a long time and just glad that we finally were able to meet online and speak about that.
Hello, I'm Dr. Debi, and I've been helping men, women, and couples grow together for more than 25 years. Now it's your turn to learn what I learned and taught as a couples counselor and university professor. You are the wise woman, and this is your personal development podcast packed with instant encouragement and practical tips. And men can learn about women too, because this is a safe place where women are valued and men are respected. We talk about biology, socialization, behavior, emotions, communication, and connection, because men and women are different. Always have been, always will be, and that's a very good thing. Yes, I think it started with that you sent me an email and said
I
something to
did.
me about liking what I was
I
doing.
did.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it
just
wasn't
it came
long.
to me one day. Just I wanted to email you and thank you for the work that you have done and how helpful it has been in working with couples. And then we met from going forward from there.
Yeah. And we set up a Zoom call and we just got to
Yes,
know one another a little bit, and that's been a minute ago. So,
of course.
Kelly, you obviously work with couples,
Yes,
and but you do so much more than that. Tell us a little bit
yes.
about what you do.
Certainly, certainly. Well, as a counselor, I specialize working with anxiety, trauma, and couples, specifically working mostly with individuals who are recovering from sex addiction, actually working with the couple to come back together, or porn addiction. I also supervise other uh, counselors that are coming into the field, and I co own a uh, counseling practice, and we also have a directory that connects Christian counselors together. So that's a little bit of an overview of everything that I do.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff. So, you are licensed in what state?
I am licensed in North Carolina, and I also can provide telehealth counseling in South Carolina and Florida.
Okay.
Yes.
Very good. So, you said that you also have a network a
Yes.
referral system for people that maybe
Yes.
are outside of those states?
Yes. So years ago, it was actually when I was in seminary, it came to me that I wish it was much easier for people to find counselors, specifically a Christian counselor, and even pastors and churches like knowing where to refer and connect. And so years ago, we started a volunteer group called North Carolina Association of Christian Counselors. And we would meet at our seminary, and we would just gather and pray for our clients and get to know each other, and it kind of grew from there. And then we just really came to the point where we didn't want it to be just North Carolina. And so we went forward and opened up a Unifie therapist network. And so it's open to all counselors in all 50 states. And we share resources and referrals. We have a secure way of doing that. And just be there to support each other. We'll meet online again, pray for each other, pray for our clients, and just sharing resources.
Wow, that's amazing. So
Yes.
is this something that you just it's an internal referral system in case you have someone that contacts you? Or is it a searchable database that someone looking for a counselor could
It's
use?
both. It's both. So there's two different areas of it. There is an area that's completely open, a directory, so somebody can go in and type in like what type of Christian counselor they're looking for. And then for the Christian counselors that are a part of the program, they have a secure way of getting to a open forum. So if they're saying, hey, I've got a referral for such and such, they need this insurance, they're located in this area, who has an opening, then they can just email back on the forum, hey, I've got an opening, I'm in such and such, here's my contact information.
Wow. When I was working as a clinical psychologist, that was a huge thing. I would get people that would call me up and want to, and when I was in Southern California, I'm in Texas now, but in Southern California, they would contact me and they would say, do you take my insurance? And the answer was usually no.
Right.
I was on several panels, but certainly not all of them. And they would say that when they went on their insurance website to look for a counselor, they couldn't tell who was Christian and who wasn't.
Right. It's a big issue.
It's a huge issue.
Yes.
And so that you've got that. Wow, I wish I would have known that. I would have been sending people there more often. I'll definitely take advantage of that. And I'll put the link to that in the description below so that people will actually know how to reach out to someone. That's fantastic. Tell me a little bit about what kind of trauma you work with. You said that you're a trauma counselor.
Yes. Populations-wise, when I first started counseling, I worked primarily with veterans. And from then, I've moved more into working primarily with sexual abuse victims. But honestly, I've done a lot of different types of trauma, but those would be the two primary populations.
Okay, thanks. Your voice is starting to wane.
Okay, I will do best. I'm sorry. Okay, so I will do my best to keep it up. Okay.
It's just a really good sign of a great counselor that you can talk with this really tender, kind, gentle
It's like
voice.
a trained thing from so many years, and so it's hard not to go into that mode.
Yeah.
But I will do my best to keep it up.
Yeah. And I'm going to tell you, I just might not clip that part out because I think that shows that you have this incredible joy for life, Kelly. And it's something that people need to know about a counselor that they're working with, that there's a real person there. They're sitting in the room with a real life person. And especially as a Christian, you want to know that person is not just there looking at you like you're this poor, pitiful, victim of life, but life is full and it's rich.
That's right.
I remember working with some of my couples saying, that they couldn't believe how we would go from 1 minute we would be deep into their pain and crying, and the next minute we would be laughing. And they're like, how do you do that? Well, that's because that's the way life is.
It is. Very true.
Yeah. So I love that about you, and it's fun to see that, and you have a very delightful laugh.
Well, thank you very much. Anyway, very kind. Very kind.
And even working through issues of trauma, humor is a huge way to help kind of lighten the load a bit when things get really heavy. And if you can't do that, then it's very easy to get stuck in that place.
Yes.
With the trauma victims that I've worked with, I've done that very thing. They don't want to go into that deep space.
Right.
And so we'll just visit for a little bit, and then we'll go into the deep space, and then I'll pull them back out.
Exactly.
And I pull them back out with the laughter, and that way it helps to moderate some of that pain and make it more doable, to get through the process. So I really, I think that's one of the things I liked about you when we talked the first time, was that you are so real and that you're so passionate about what you do and you care deeply for these folks. And I think it's important for clients to know that you are praying for them, even though you may not pray with them.
Right.
I know when I was in doing clinical work, I would not pray with my clients, but I would be praying for my clients in my spirit while I was with them.
Right, exactly.
And there were times I would say, Lord, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. and then something would come out of my mouth that I hadn't thought of.
That's happened many
Something
a times
good
to me.
Yes. Yes.
It's like you want to take
Yes.
notes on yourself because you're like, where did that come from? But we know where
Right.
it came from.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
Exactly. I had a client maybe 7 or 8 years ago that I was sitting with, and I was like, Lord, I don't even know how to be here right now. I really don't. The
Yes.
trauma was so heavy. And I was like, Lord, you need to take over.
Yes.
And I found myself that whole session talking to this person in this really soft voice, very caring voice. And I was like, wow, that was definitely the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
That was
100%.
not
Yes.
me. And,
Yeah.
The Lord really did come in and be with that client. And after they left, I was like, wow,
Yes.
what a beautiful thing when the Lord intervenes like that for us. And
Very beautiful thing to witness.
yeah,
Yes.
it's amazing. So, and you say you also work with anxiety. So, what kinds of
Yes, I
anxiety
do.
issues are you taking? Generalized anxiety, phobias?
Yeah, well, actually, I've done all. Like, there's actually a Charlotte consortium with the counselors that specialize the most with anxiety, and I'm a part of that consortium. So, primarily generalized anxiety, social phobias, and all the way, even though this is classified differently, the OCD. So, we'll do kind of a span, but those tend to be the main focuses of anxiety in particular.
Okay. So you've worked with all kinds of anxiety, and
Yes.
your primary techniques, I'm assuming, are more along the cognitive behavioral
Yes.
line.
Yes. I'm very much CBT oriented and also like DBT oriented. So just very much passionate at helping people to understand their bodies, be attuned with their bodies, understanding their
Okay.
nervous system and how it responds to different stimuli and what that means.
Okay. So CBT, most everybody knows that's cognitive behavioral therapy, but what
Yes.
is DBT? They may not know that.
Yes, dialectible behavioral therapy, and it's very much focused primarily the way we would be using it in the context of anxiety about regulating the body, regulating the emotions, and being attuned to oneself.
Okay.
So it's a wonderful treatment modality to help learn how to do those things.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Most people, when they experience anxiety, just want it to go away.
Yes.
And so the tendency is just not to pay attention to it, and you
Right.
try to ignore it. But when you do that, it tends to make it even worse. Do you find that to be true?
100%. Yes, it's important to understand the cues of our body and what it's telling us. And again, a lot of times, the greatest long-term health issues are going to be associated to us not listening to the cues our body is giving us. So if we can attend to what anxiety is telling us, we can address the message that it's giving us and be able to make the decision of how you want to go forward in that situation. So that's the best way to kind of work through and not have a lot of the physiological symptoms that anxiety brings and suffering in that way.
Wow, you really said that so well, Kelly, that idea of listening to your body and what is it telling you, and then making a conscious decision about what you're going to do about what it's telling you. Very, very important. I think that the primary problem with most mental health issues is people just want to feel better.
Right.
And they tend to want to like push down all of the unpleasant feelings. But what happens when they do that is they also push down the pleasant feelings.
That's exactly right.
And it doesn't go anywhere. And, I used to use the illustration a lot, living 15 minutes from Disneyland in Southern California. We would talk about the whack-a-mole little game that I don't know if they still have it there, but if you don't deal with it in one area, it'll pop up somewhere else. Yeah,
that's exactly right.
Again, exactly. So yeah, and there's no shame in feeling anxiety. It's actually a very normal part of life.
It is.
But when you ignore it or you misinterpret it, then
it's going to take more over your body at that point.
Yeah, right. Yes. And
Yes.
and your body is, again, it's screaming at you, hey,
It
pay
is.
attention here, something's going on. Sometimes that is a real thing that you need to address, and other times it's like you're caught in a loop
Yes.
where the anxiety is just producing more anxiety.
Exactly.
And and then you can use the techniques to break that loop
That's right.
and slow it down enough that you can figure it out. Right.
Of course. Yes.
Very, very good. I love it. I love it. So tell me about your work with couples.
Yes, certainly. So, like I said earlier, primarily, I mean, I do work with, couples from premarital going forward, but over the past few years have specialized more with working with couples who are recovering from a sexual addiction or a porn addiction. And so normally how that works is each in the couple has their own individual counselor. And so we all work together as a treatment team to understand when they're ready to come into the marriage process of restoration. And so a lot of times we, focusing on very much the topics of forgiveness and creating new patterns and being able to rebuild trust and rebuild intimacy tends to be our main focuses once they get to that part of treatment.
Okay, very cool. So how exactly do you work with couples? I mean, there's lots of different schools of thought on that.
Yes.
There's John Gottman's work.
Right.
There's Sue Johnson's work, and people may
Yes.
not even know what those are.
Right.
But what is it that is your main focus?
Certainly. So it's a little bit eclectic. I will say that first and foremost. A lot of it is your thoughts and principles that are in the foundation of it. Let me say that first and foremost. I'm also Gottman 1 and 2 level trained for those who do understand what that means. And I have had some training within like ITAP, which is something specifically, some people might know what a CSAT is. It's something specifically in regards to pornography addiction and sex addiction training.
Okay.
And I have some advanced training helping the betrayed partner. And so I've utilized that also in helping kind of understand how to rebuild that trust overall. So again, more plainly said, being able to understand and connect how they're communicating and trying to help them to communicate really what they're wanting to communicate. A very tangible resource, which Debi, I know you also have utilized, is Prepare and Enrich. I really like that resource to give couples something tangible in their hand to be able to work from also. So it's a bit of a mixture of all of those schools put together.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Yes.
Very good. Have you had any exposure to emotionally focused therapy with couples?
Yes, I have. I've leaned a little bit more into some of the techniques of Gottman between the two, but yes, some of the overall arching principles of how cycles begin, pursuer distancers, things of that nature, 100% will bring that in also.
Right.
Yes.
One of the things that I would hear from couples all the time was that they had been to a couples counselor and that they would sit in the office and they would argue with one another.
Yes.
And at the end of the session, the therapist would say, okay, well, I'll see you next week.
Yes.
And it's just so sad.
Yes, very much so.
Right. And what I would do in the beginning is I would just sit down and I would say to both of them, so what brings you here?
Right.
And I would wait to see who spoke first.
Yes.
Because that was part of my diagnosing the cycle, was to see who spoke first.
That's exactly right.
And how they approached it.
Yes.
And then I would wait until the other person, to see if the other person would interrupt.
Yes.
Which was another stage of that, because that helps you identify that negative cycle.
That's right.
And then I would make a rule, and I would say, okay, I didn't tell you this before, but I have a rule. Only one person gets to talk at a time.
Right.
And I get to decide who that person is. And sometimes it's going to be me.
Certainly.
So it worked really well. And then I would continue to work with them. And sometimes I would go into, if someone was kind of flooding, then I would do the talking. I would do like you do, and I would go
Yeah.
into my soft voice and I would do kind of a teaching
Yes.
moment, and I would watch for the person to be able to de-escalate a little bit
Of course.
to see if we could continue.
Yes.
And so that was part of, also I'm assessing what's going on, as well as I'm working on those anxiety reducing techniques, those kinds of things. At the same time, I'm evaluating and watching how the partner's responding.
Yes.
So I would almost do, and I'm telling you this because I wonder if this one might help you kind of explain what you do a little bit better. What I would do is I would pick one person, usually the person who was the most withdrawn, and I would figure that out from Prepare and Rich.
Yes.
And the person who was the most avoidant, and I would ask them the question first. So how are things going? And get them to talk about it as though they're the only person in the room. Validate, do all those EFT type things, or even Carl Rogers, client-centered therapy from the old days. I used to be a professor, so this is kind of fun to bring all this stuff back up.
Yes.
But then I would do that, and then I would say, thank you so much for sharing that with me. I'm going to talk to your wife for a minute.
Right.
Okay, great. And I would turn to her then, and I would say, what was happening for you while your husband was talking about whatever? Yes. And then I would do the same thing with her, and I would validate what she was feeling. And then at some point, I would help them begin to talk to one another, but just getting them to sit in the same room and listen to one another was huge.
Right. 100%.
So do you step in and really take charge of a couple session?
Yes.
Okay.
I think when couples counseling works well, the couples counselor is more directive, speaks more in the session, because there really does need to be guidance, just as you stated there. And like, just for example, like over the years, and I'm not saying that every couple can do this starting off, but I teach my couples to do this starting off, because a lot of people dread couples counseling. So my couples know the first thing when they come in, I want them to tell me something good about the other one. So that's always my first question. I was like, tell me something good. And it can be something specific that has happened since the last time we met, or it can be something specific about their character, personality. It can be in general too. Because again, a lot of people start to dread the thought of, okay, what is the other going to say about me when we go in? So they always know that. And over time, the couples kind of start to get excited about what the other one is going to say. And sometimes they start to share in the car before they get to the session, which is a very good thing. And then it kind of switches kind of the anxiety and kind of mode that they're in. And then I always will ask, because just kind of addressing the anxiety piece of it, I will always say, we know where we paused last time, but is there anything on either your hearts or minds that you want us to be sure to speak about today before we do pick back up where we paused? So I always wanted to get that out of the way at the beginning, because obviously wanting to honor where they are in that moment. But also, I know there's no way to move forward if they're just holding on to something too, that they feel like they need to voice. So yes, being very directive and checking in on with the other one, how did you feel or think, or what was your perspective on what was just shared, is always like the way that each session is started.
Right. That's excellent. Yeah, I think that I would have no trouble referring couples to you. So one of the other things that I would do with my couples, when one of them, is talking, as we get a little farther along in our work together, one's talking and I can see the other person have a really strong emotional reaction.
Yes.
And like, I remember one time, and I actually wrote about it in my book, and the couple's sitting there, and the woman says, if I'm the problem, this is a premarital couple. She goes, if I'm the problem, then I'm just going to, leave.
Yes.
And her partner just glazed over. And I told her, I said, do you know what he heard? he heard, "You better get your act together, buddy, or I'm out of here."
That's right.
And then
That's
I
right.
asked him if that was what he heard, and he said, "Yeah, that's what he heard."
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's not what I think she's saying. I think she's saying that she so desperately wants this to work, and she
Right.
sees you trying so hard, and that if it would be easier on you for her to step away, then she's willing to do that. Didn't
Yes.
sound like a sacrifice to him. It felt like a threat.
Right. Right.
So oftentimes I would turn to the other partner, and this is a little different way of doing that. I would turn to the partner and I would say, "What did you hear?"
Yes.
And I would most often do that with a woman, because a woman is a little bit more able to verbalize what she's feeling than men are. Men are not trained to talk about their emotions.
Right.
For sure. In fact, they're taught to ignore them
Not to.
and to
Exactly.
take action instead. So I would turn to a woman, I'd say, "What did you just hear your husband say?" And she'll tell me. And then I'll say to her, "Well, that's not what I heard. What I heard was,"
Exactly.
and then I'll rephrase what he said.
Yes.
And then I'll ask him, "Did I get it right?" And
That's
he'll
right.
usually always say, "You did it way better than I did." That's exactly
Yeah.
what I was trying to say.
Yes.
So there's a lot gets lost in the translation,
100%.
I've noticed, between the people, especially when emotions are running really high.
Yes,
So
very much so.
do you give people homework to do?
Yes, I mean, I think you also would know, like, some couples want homework and will do homework, and some couples will not. So it depends
Right.
on how structured. For couples who are like, "I want it and I'll do it," I'll give very structured. For those who are not, I'll be more like, "Will you just practice this technique at least one time?" So just depending on, I always want to give like a focus and, hey, this is where we're pausing, this is where we are in treatment, things of that nature. But different couples respond in different ways to homework. So just meeting the couple where they're at.
I would most often assign reading.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I have the courses set up now where it releases one lesson per day.
Right.
And that to get in the habit of them listening to one 5 to 10 minute lesson per day.
Yes.
And then I've got a discussion guide, a couple discussion guide, then that they can use to get them in the habit of, one, the man taking spiritual leadership, which in my experience has been a huge relief to women, that their husband cares enough to look at something spiritual and to pray with her, to take the leadership in that.
Yes.
And that it just solves so many problems, but it helps create that habit. So that's my most frequent homework for couples, is to do that sort of thing. But then at the end of every session, I will have them turn and talk to one another. And talk about what the session was like, and then they have to play back what they heard, which is a very prepare and rich sort of thing. But it's the speaker listener technique. But in that first session, what I would always do is, instead of having them talk about what they talked about, I would say, to the husband, for instance, if he's the one who's more avoidant, I would say, because she's sitting there going, "What is he thinking? Are we going to come back? Is this going to be okay? What's going on?" So I would say to him, "Can you tell your wife what it was like for you today talking to me?"
Yes.
Now, you can tell her that anything you want to, you're not going to hurt my feelings. You can tell her that I suck and you never want to see me again. I'm okay with that. So there I just lightened the mood a little bit, took the pressure off. And then he tells her, and then I say, "Okay, now can you play back what he said using his words?" Starting with, "You said." Sometimes I'll try to do it like a tape recorder. And "You said," and then she'll repeat it. And then she says, "Did I get that right?" And then if she didn't, then he corrects her. And she tries it again. And they're learning the communication from the beginning. But it also gives me feedback about how they're really feeling, because we can misinterpret, even as professionals, we can misinterpret what somebody is really thinking and feeling in any given moment. I mean, we read them pretty well, but we can be off.
100%.
And so it helps me know if I'm on the right track, if this is going to be a good match. And then if I take the person who is the more outspoken, the one who's less avoidant, and let them talk second, then some of their anxiety is relieved because their partner usually says it was good. It felt
That's
good to have
right.
somebody really hear me and understand me.
Yes.
So, I don't know if you've ever done that, but I would do it at the end of every
Yeah,
session.
it's actually a very standard thing to do throughout the entire session. The miscommunication piece is huge amongst couples, and I always will say, "Hey, let me know if what I'm saying is wrong. Correct me. You can interrupt me." I always say that to my clients, but I'm thinking you're saying da 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 da. So that's actually done throughout each session, every session. But it is something that is usually introduced in the first or second session of working with a couple.
Okay, very good.
Yes.
So we have a lot of similarities in how we work with people. The big difference is that you are you and I am me.
It's true.
Very
true.
Because
very
we
true.
always have some specific things that
That's
fit
right.
us that nobody else really can do, because we're just as unique. And I always say, if individuals are unique, then now you've got a total uniqueness. No couple is exactly the same.
That's right.
Because you've got two individuals that have stepped into that space together.
That's right.
So what would you say that couples like best about working with you? They tell you at the end. I know you do this because you're an excellent clinician, so I know that you ask them for feedback.
Yes. Usually clients, the most feedback that I get is how fun it was and how much we laughed. And again, it's kind of hard to imagine that with some of the topics that obviously I specialize in, being from everything from trauma, like I said, and also addiction-oriented topics. But I am one that really does believe, just as Scripture speaks about mourning, joy, dancing, these comparisons that are the complete opposite. I do believe that you can do this work in a very joyful way. So usually that is the main kind of feedback that they receive, is like just how much they laughed, how much fun they were having, and they did not expect that.
Wow. That is so cool. Yeah. Because we need to put that on your website. You will laugh, you will cry.
You will laugh. Certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly.
So what got you into doing this kind of work, Kelly? You obviously are very passionate about all those areas that you work in, as well as making sure clients are connected with the help that they need wherever in the country they are.
Yes.
What drives you? What motivates you to do all that?
So growing up, I had some people that were very close to me that had various mental health issues, and I saw some receive the help that was really needed and saw the amazing things that came from that, and then I saw some that did not, and the unfortunate results. Both like trying to get the help needed, but one successful, one was not. And so just walking through those scenes and seeing what took place, it just became very clear to me that the Lord was calling me into a career path or into a vocation, a calling to be a part of the counseling scene that would prayerfully and hopefully be very good help for people. And so the passion just kept growing, and I even knew in 11th grade that this was what I was going to do. So I knew very early on in life that this was the direction that the Lord was leading, and it's been an absolute honor. As I always say, I think the people that I admire the most that I've ever come in contact with has been my clients, because it takes so much, courage to go forward and say, this is the time I want to tell my story, or I want what's being passed down generationally to stop here, and something new and afresh to a start. And so it truly is. It's such an honor to be able to do this for a living.
Yeah. Well, I just commend you for following the Lord's leading and all of that. And that you can always tell when somebody's following their heart's passion, because there's so much joy around it and satisfaction and a deeper connection and meaning to life when you can do that. So I'm just so glad that you Googled that day, whenever it was,
Yes.
and found me.
Yes.
And I am determined, as I've told you before, I'm going to make it to North Carolina.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Days.
Very welcomed.
Absolutely, I'm going to show up there, and it's actually on my plan and within the next couple of years to make it there.
That would be wonderful.
Maybe sooner, maybe later, whatever. But anyway, I need to buy you lunch.
Well, you'll be very, very welcomed, to say the least.
I love it. I love it. So if someone lives in North Carolina and they want to work with you, how is the best way to find you?
Best way, it's honestly SureHopeCounseling.com or KellysCounseling.com. Both of those websites will give all the direct information. I'm currently 100% telehealth, so it's very easy to get connected and everything. But also for people who may want in-person treatment, as I said, as co-owner of a counseling practice, and can help connect them to others that are in person also.
Okay. So you're not currently doing in person?
I am not in person. I'm currently 100% telehealth.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes.
So either one of those websites will get them to you if they are in North Carolina, South Carolina, or Florida.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
That's right.
Okay. And then you've got the network.
Yes.
I will put the link to that below, to both of those websites and that below. Is there anything else that you want folks to know about you and what you do, or about themselves? Any word of encouragement? What would you like to say?
Just wherever you are in your story, like I said earlier, the people that I've admired the most in my life have been people who go forward and want to address whatever it is that's holding them back from, having the joy and peace that they want in life. And so wherever you are in your story, you may be very hesitant to take that next step, but the Lord will continue to walk you through the path. The Lord has a full plan to get you to the other side, and just being able to take that first step of faith is huge. And again, the Lord will meet them.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you so much, Kelly, for your time today.
Thank you so much.
Virtual hugs to you.
Yes, same to you.
Yeah. So cool. So you can reach out to Kelly and find out more about what she does. Ask for her help. You can also find other counselors who share the same values in terms of being a Christian therapist. And I'm with Kelly. Do it. The Lord is with you, and we are meant to walk in joy. That doesn't mean we're happy all the time, because life is difficult.
Right.
But the outcome of everything is to be the joy of the Lord.
Exactly.
Because He's our strength. So
that's right.
I love the title, SureHope Counseling. That makes a lot of sense. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening to this episode of A Wise Woman's Guide to Men and Marriage. What did you think? Did the information raise more questions? Do you want to learn more? Head over to wisewomansguide.com for show notes and links to the resources mentioned in this episode. And if you're looking for other wise women to bounce around ideas and ask questions, be sure to join my exclusive community for women on Facebook. The link is waiting for you at awisewomansguide.com.